Hello, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to present our paper, The Impact of Sub-Crises on Follower Perceptions of Crisis Leadership Effectiveness. Going over a quick introduction of organizational crises. Crisis events in organizations have become more frequent, more unpredictable, and more public. With the shifting market conditions and uncertainties, frequent crises occur. When we say crisis, I think the first event that comes to all of our minds is the COVID pandemic. It was a worldwide phenomenon and a massive crisis that impacted every nation, every industry, and every business in some form. It was a huge threat to organizational values because of how organizations and leaders chose to respond to COVID. These were testing times when the strengths and weaknesses of leaders were exposed. COVID was a huge crisis in itself. To make things worse, it was also accompanied and complicated by more sub-events or sub-crises. Through the times, there have been many crises that shifted industries and perspectives. Some examples are listed here, like the BP Deepwater Horizon disaster, Boeing 737 crashes, and data breaches that happen on an everyday basis now. On the contrary, moving on to crisis leadership theory. What is crisis leadership theory? It is a theory that focuses on how leaders respond to crisis. They must ask the right questions. They must be able to rearrange resources in a timely manner and must effectively shift their strategy based on the evolving crisis and various situations it presents. There is no one rule book to follow for crisis management. However, crisis management is very different from crisis leadership. Crisis management focuses more on the operational or business aspects of a crisis, whereas we see that crisis leadership focuses on balancing crisis management with adaptability, ethical decisions, and human centered responses. Good crisis leaders always prioritize stability in this volatile environment, empowering people and ensuring in building trust as they navigate the crisis. As I said, there's no one rule book or a checklist for managing crises. So, to be successful, these leaders must improvise, be flexible, and possess high emotional intelligence. A crisis is a high stress environment, so leaders must control their emotions and reactions to inculcate good morale, positive brand image, and be a motivation. If they react in haste to crisis, it will lead to ethical missteps, spreading of misinformation, blaming each other in the team or organization, and all of these actions will have serious negative impacts on the organization culture, performance, success, and even existence. Moving quickly on to our research question and methodology for this study. The primary research question that we tried to dive deep into was, do sub-events or sub-crises during a major crisis have any impact on follower perceptions based on crisis leadership effectiveness? So we looked at crisis leadership effective in an organization, and this was measured using 5 key parameters: communication, safety, resources, fairness, and employee voice. And then the shifts in perception of sub-crisis were narrowed down to 5 sub-events or sub-crises that happened during the pandemic in the USA. The first one was social injustice. A prominent example of social injustice was the murder of George Floyd by a police officer and the vaccine mandates. Governments and businesses made vaccines mandatory. Although this was welcoming for some people, there was some pushback, or a certain society groups or certain individuals also did not align well or accept the vaccine mandates. And another sub crisis was the voter laws. Voter right initiatives changed a lot during COVID, like vote by mail, early in person voting, registration modifications, etc. This was not welcomed by all, as some parties had reservations about these changes and how they will impact the election or their outcomes. The next one was the travel restrictions. Again, local international travel was all halted. This is like a deja vu for all of us, where we were not allowed to leave our house to travel anywhere by road, by flight, by any means of travel. This not only impacted the travel industry and hospitality industry, but it impacted everybody around the world because personal, professional, business, or leisure travel, everything was halted. And the 2020 presidential election turned out to be another event or a sub crisis because it happened in the midst of all the confusion that was happening with COVID. All these sub events and more, in fact, had varying levels of impact on businesses, as these businesses and leaders had to navigate these events while also not losing focus on the main COVID pandemic. This study was conducted in a Fortune 150 organization, and we had 334 respondents to our surveys. Um, that's about the study. Moving to our key results. So the correlation analysis showed statistically significant relationships between the various crisis leadership dimensions and all the 5 sub-crisis events. Further, regression analysis resulted in identifying employee voice and fairness as the most predictive factors. Sub-events such as social injustice and vaccine mandates, travel restrictions strongly influenced follower perceptions. Chi-square tests revealed that demographic variables like age, race, seniority in the organization significantly affected changes in perception during the sub-crises. Post-hoc analysis was also conducted, and it showed how different demographic groups responded uniquely to these events, like voter rights, elections, based on individual preferences and beliefs. The discussion for the study. In summary, we found that the results supported the alternate hypothesis. Sub-events did significantly influence follower perceptions of crisis leadership effectiveness. The findings also indicate that the sub-crises do not impact everyone equally. Individual opinions, values, and identities, beliefs shape perception. Demographic variables shaped how followers responded to social and political crisis. It is imperative that an organization or its representative, who are the leaders, should not take a stance in these events. Rather, they must be neutral setting. They have to keep aside their personal beliefs so people in the organization are united and develop trust. This goes back to the emotional intelligence component we discussed in our earlier slides. Followers expect stability in a period of uncertainty. They want their leaders to be inclusive, predictable, and values driven. The findings of this study confirm that context, identity, and alignment between leader actions and follower values influence leadership effectiveness. Going down to the conclusion of our study, effective crisis leadership is a strategic advantage that protects organizational reputation, stability, and even survival during these testing times. And the findings support recent literatures concluding that adaptiveness, emotionally intelligent leaders are essentials in a time of crisis. And crisis does not just mean COVID or the sub crises, but also everyday crisis that happens internally to organizations or in the economic environment can also be worldwide. Ultimately, people remember how leaders made them feel, especially in moments of uncertainty and disruption. The conclusion is a universal one size fits all approach to crisis leadership is ineffective in complex multi event crisis. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the chair, the organizers, and the other participants for giving us the opportunity to discuss our research. Questions or comments?